I had an opportunity to interview one of my all-time favorite authors tonight about a book that he wrote in 2007 with a villain who is amazingly like Donald Trump. This is Laurence Shames. Am I saying it correctly?
You nailed it.
Okay, and we're talking about a book called Money Talks. And when did you write this book?
I wrote this book in 2007, and the way it came about, it's kind of a crazy story from the perspective of 2017. Way back in 2007, I got a phone call from a literary agent, kind of out of the blue, and asked me if I would like to write a mystery novel or a series of mystery novels as ghostwriter for Donald Trump.
Okay.
And I said, let's first have full disclosure. I don't care for Donald Trump. I have never heard anything good about working with Donald Trump. I can't imagine working with Donald Trump. And the literary agent said, you wouldn't be working with him. You would be just the ghostwriter. You'd get some money. He'd get most of the money. It would come out under his name. It would be a bestseller because it would be by Donald Trump. And I said, well, okay, maybe that could work. And then I said, so here's my next question. Does Donald Trump really want to do this? And the literary agent said, well, I have a line to his people. I think maybe he'd like to do it. It's no work for him. He'd make some money. I'll check it out. Think about it. So I started thinking about what would it be like to ghostwrite a book for Donald Trump. And I had lived in New York for 20 years. I had done some business writing as a sideline. And I kind of knew that world a bit. So writers being writers, I started thinking about it. And I got over my initial thinking of, oh my God, I couldn't possibly do this, to kind of getting excited about it. So I'm thinking about this book. A week goes by, 10 days go by. And I get a call from the agent saying, forget about it. Trump doesn't want to do it. By that time, I was kind of revved up. And I'd been thinking about this idea. And I said, you know what? Who needs Trump? How about if I just write this as a novel from the perspective of a ghostwriter doing a book for someone who rather resembles Donald Trump?
Rather.
And the agent said, you know what, it's a pretty good idea. Maybe it'll sell. Send me 100 pages. So I started writing this book. I had a blast with it. I like to think that I kind of got inside the mind of someone like Donald Trump, and I had a blast writing the book.
Well, I mean, for anybody who hasn't read the book yet, I mean, as you started, my mouth was probably open as you were started, because that is basically on one level, the description of the beginning of the book, that this ghostwriter gets asked to write a book for this person that's kind of like Donald Trump. Not kind of, that's a lot like Donald Trump. So a lot of the stuff that you wrote in this, I'm assuming, is your experience. Like when you were saying, you know, I sat down and started thinking about it, and then the book started growing on me, basically. That's what the character does too.
Yeah, it's very much what I went through when imagining what this would be like. And by coincidence, I had met Donald Trump once, years before, at a magazine industry event, just in passing. I had done a telephone interview with Donald Trump once for an article I was doing about the Wharton School for the New York Times Magazine. So, and certainly he was already very much a celebrity in New York. So I had a sense of him. I had heard his voice firsthand. Right. I had done some business writing. I knew Midtown Manhattan, and it all came together. And I thought, you know, I can do this. And of course, in 2007, who imagined that this person would be in the White House in 2017.
Right.
I certainly didn't imagine
Right.
it. So I didn't approach it like I'm writing about the guy who's going to be president. I had 10 years before, I'm writing about a kind of interesting villain.
Well, yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I have a lot of questions about how you went about going about doing your research. I mean, you're saying that you basically were the main character, the guy, the ghostwriter. And so I'm looking at his descriptions about how he went. Like, what kind of research did you do? There are descriptions in the book about him. There are descriptions about his house. There's descriptions, I kept thinking, where is research? Where is what you know? And where is fiction? Where are they related in the book, if you remember?
Well, let's start with research,
Okay.
because that's the easiest one.
Okay.
There wasn't any.
Oh. Okay.
Zero research. Zero.
Okay. So it's fictional, but the voice feels very. I mean, it just. You know who it is right from the start.
Well, thank you. I mean, I like to think that means that I kind of got it right. As I said, I had done some business writing. My first book actually was about a class from Harvard Business School.
Right.
I had done some business journalism for the New York Times. So I was not uncomfortable with that world. I had been in the offices of CEOs and chairmen. So
were you ever in an office like the description of Trump's office, or in a house like the description? Trump Max's house or Max's office?
I don't think I've been in an office quite that grand, because I'm not sure there was an office quite that grand, or a house that over the top. Although I had been, out in the Hamptons, I had been in some pretty grandiose houses and thought, you can't make this stuff up, except you can.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. So there's a secondary story here. There's a story there's a really interesting sort of secondary theme about artists, because there's the ghostwriter is an artist. I mean, he's a writer. There's his ex-wife, who he's still in love with. It's okay for me to mention all this, isn't? Of course.
Oh, of course.
I read these repeatedly. And she's a classical pianist who's now having some issues with her body. And so they're at this point of their lives where they thought they had this golden future, and now they're really facing themselves as real artists with real issues. And then there's Max's brother, who is, fancies himself an artist, and doesn't need any money. So the interplay of money and art, I think, I found that really interesting as an artist. And your descriptions of Juilliard, and I just wanted to know, where does that fit?
Well, one of the themes of the book, in my mind at least, is authenticity. And so you've got this Robert Max character who's very rich and very powerful, and he's a phony. He's a complete phony. He has people writing his books. He has people doing his deals. He is inauthentic, powerful, but inauthentic. And so by contrast, my poor schnook of a ghostwriter kind of resembles myself. He's at least authentic. And his estranged wife, who he hopes to win back, is authentic. She's for real. She is passionate about what she does, and she's a musician. And one of the kind of sub themes that I wanted to explore was the solitary nature of writing, as opposed to the collaborative nature of music.
That was really interesting. Your descriptions of in Juilliard, those social versus the isolation. It was really interesting.
Yeah, the writer is sort of candidly envious of that communication among people playing chamber music. So it's a way of exploring different kinds of art, different kinds of creativity, but bottom line, different kinds of authenticity, and people being true to themselves and true to their passions or not.
Wow, that's interesting. That brings up the character of Jenna, the Max's assistant. is also really interesting in terms of authenticity and her, her sexuality, or what she's like.
Right. Yeah. I found her an interesting character. Black woman, has to be better, smarter than anyone else because she's Black. She I mean, she is savvy to the nth degree. So she knows she's cut her deal. She knows who she's working for.
Mm-hmm.
She's made her peace with it. But yeah, it's not easy for her, being who she is racially and in terms of gender identity. It's not easy for her to function in the world in which she functions at a very high level. So she's a complex character, and I found it really interesting to think about her.
There were a lot of interesting women characters in here. The Mandy, the journalist who outs Max, and then it's such an interesting. There was a quote. He gets her fired using, and I mean, it's just really interesting, all the dynamics of that, and how to him it's just like kind of like a game. Anyway, she was an interesting character as well.
I had a good time with her. She was the woman who put the wow in the Dow.
Right. There's one of my favorite quotes. I don't know if I wrote it down. It's something about an hourglass. It's like an hourglass stuck into 40 minutes or something.
Yes, the hourglass figure shrunk down to 40 minutes.
Right.
And frankly, the other line I like about Mandy is that her body was like a book with no parts you could skip.
Right. I remember that. Yeah, it was really fun to read about her, and just kind of what she did as well. It was fun to have these powerful women characters and also these authentic women characters in this.
Well, my wife keeps me honest about that.
Well, that's great.
If I do a bad female character, I can't have female characters bursting into tears and getting all weepy. I can't do that.
Well, that's really interesting, because of course I wanted to ask, what, does Marilyn play the piano? And do you have a brother who's, anyway, that doesn't matter. I knew it. But talk to me about the character of Robert Max's brother. So he's an artist also.
Right. He is a total, he's totally made up. Okay. To the best of my knowledge, there isn't anyone in Donald Trump's family who goes with that. There may be,
right.
But basically he was made up, and I wanted him to be a foil to Robert Max, to the villain, because the brother may or may not be crazy. He's certainly troubled. But he's a true artist in that it is his passion. Now, there's a difference between being a true artist and a good artist.
Right.
It happens that, in my mind at least, Tony, the brother's tragedy is that he's not very talented, but that's not his fault. It's, you're talented or you're not. He is sincere in his dedication to his art. So to that extent, I sympathize with him and I respect him. But that's different from saying he was a wonderful painter, because he's not a wonderful painter.
That's really interesting, just because now I'm seeing this theme come up. That's another theme from Scavenger Reef, is the whole thing about the artists who are good artists or who are passionate artists who have that's really interesting. I'm just kind of seeing these come up again. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this now is because of it's so resonant with Trump, and reading it, there's a whole thing that describes, I probably have it written here something, but what it means to be leveraged, and how somebody at that level can be leveraged to the point that they don't really have any money. I mean, they're using money, but they're basically using what they've sold to finance the, whatever they have. Now, because I read this book, it makes me hear what's happening very differently, and with a lot more anxiety, maybe.
Right.
Did you make that up, or is that?
Well, I made up the particulars. But those principles, those principles of finance and how business empires are put together, I'm very confident that I got that right. And you know, leverage at that level, it's amazing. Every now and then you hear about a gigantic company going bust, going bankrupt. And you think, how could it possibly go bankrupt? It was so substantial. It was
Right.
so big.
Right.
If you look more closely, it's done with other people's money. It's done with borrowed money. It's done with money that you expect to earn the day after tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
But if your interest payment is due the day before tomorrow, you've got a problem. And particularly with a real estate empire, you buy your first property. The down payment is 10%. But you get some other partners, so you put in 1 or 2%. But it seems as if you own this piece of property.
Right.
You don't own it. The bank owns it. You use the income, the presumed income from that property to buy another and another and another and another. And so at some point, you have what seems like a huge, substantial empire. If there's an interruption in the cash flow, if the creditors, for whatever reason, say, no, you got to pay up now, it falls apart.
Yeah, well, that was so dramatized. I mean, with humor as well. I mean, the book is funny and it's fun to read. But there were some things that really, if someone had just told me things like this, I don't think it would have stuck in my mind. But because of how it fit in the story, that was really fascinating. Other things of certain ways he was able to bully people using real estate, like, how he got this journalist fired by threatening the landlord of her television company that he would not, have their lease happen again. I mean, whatever. Things like that. I was just like, oh, I see. I begin to see. And then even the persona about this person who just loves to win, but in a sense doesn't have, but I wish I had I did write it somewhere. Something about how he, he's obsessed with, the ghost is writing, he's talking to Jenna, he says he's obsessed with winning, he always expects to get his way, but the times I've seen him in action, he's either begging for money or getting shot down and he barely seems to notice. It's like the smackdowns just don't register. Then Jenna says, to Jenna, this was not at all mysterious. She says, that's his gift. That's what lets him do what he does. He's incapable of embarrassment. He doesn't know when he should feel humiliated. That really fascinated me because I wonder about Trump. I mean, how much can you lie in public? Does he know he's lying? I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I mean,
Right. Well, to be perfectly honest, I think I got that so right. I just think, but again, I think I got it right by intuition. I think I got it right by studying human nature, by knowing some people kind of at that echelon of business. And, there is a kind of personality known as the sociopathic personality. Big ego, except when the situation demands, can shrink that ego to nothing and can beg and plead and wail and moan and groan until he gets his way. And then once he gets his way and once he feels like he's winning again, then he reinflates. It's like a pufferfish, just reinflates. So, can I say in a journalistic way, yeah, that's Donald Trump? No, I can't say that. No one can for sure. But in terms of creating a believable, consistent, and I think pretty accurately portrayed persona, I think that's what we're dealing with.
Well, that's part of what's so fascinating about reading it is to I don't know, kind of have your hands on it. And what you said earlier, you said, I heard his voice, or I got his voice. And that's what I felt. That's what I felt like when I was reading it. So just out of curiosity, I mean, I enjoy reading it. Why do you think that other people should read it?
I think that's an excellent question. I think people should read it first and foremost, because I do think it's entertaining. I do think it's a good yarn. It's a lot about Manhattan. It's a lot about the business world. There are many, many people out there who are feeling bewildered about what's going on, who's in charge, what kind of person are we dealing with. Again, this is fiction. This does not pretend to be anything other than fiction. But I do think that for some people who just want to say, what kind of person is this? Can I think my way into his mind? Can I try to see the world through the eyes of that person? Can I get a better understanding of who that person is, if only so I feel less helpless about it? So I like to think that the book has something to offer in that regard.
Well, I must say that I felt that way. I mean, and it's funny. And I do feel like I don't know, there is some satisfaction, even though it's all in fiction. But, I'm really glad I read it, because I think I would feel even more lost without having had, oddly, this, fiction to give me something to stand on, or some actually to give me some kind of reality, like you said, to be inside it, to get a better sense of, like, what, this is just so weird. It definitely gives me a better sense of how that's functioning.
Right. Well, thank you. I mean, that's what I was aiming to do. Without giving any plot spoilers, I think there's a fair amount of wish fulfillment in there for people who are not thrilled with the current situation. I think that's part of the fun. And again, it is a fiction.
Right.
But I do like to think that for people who are scratching their heads and saying, how did this happen? How did this guy rise to the top? Well, this is how people like that rise to the top.
Thank you so much. I loved reading it. Every time I've read it, I've enjoyed it, and I'm still reading it again. And I hope that other people will read it. And where can they get it?
Amazon. It's available for Kindle. It's available in paperback. And I hope people enjoy it.
I encourage people to get it both in Kindle and paperback. Paperback is excellent for bathtub reading, and Kindle is excellent to read in bed. My personal recommendation. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you so much. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Bye.
Bye-bye.